What's your name? What happened to my? Oh, no. All right, we're gonna start chapter three today. Financial ratios. I'm not sure that's exactly the chapter title, but that's what we're gonna do. Check here. All right, have you guys heard of financial ratios before? What do you think they're about? It's actually, what the name suggests. It's the ratios of one or more things from financial statements. Some of the financial ratios you may have heard about, but you probably didn't think of them as financial ratios. Any of you guys heard something called PE ratio? What do you think PE ratio is? What is PE long for? It's price earnings ratio. It's basically a ratio of a firm's stock price divided by earnings per share. Okay. In fact, it's used quite a bit in analyzing whether or not a stock is cheap. Heard about any other ratio? Now that you know what financial ratios are, all right. So one example is PE ratio, which is price divided by EPS, which is short for earnings per share. You may have heard something called debt equity ratio. It's basically total liabilities divided by total equity. It's one measure of to what extent firm has debt or leverage. Leverage means you're trying to make money with other people's money. And if you buy a stock with your own money and stock makes 20%, you make 20% on your money. If you bought stock with $50 of your own money and you borrow $50, and let's say they charge you 10% interest, that means you're going to owe 55, but you bought $100 worth of stock, it made 20%, you have $120. You're going to pay back 55, that's going to leave you with 65. No, 75. That means you made 50%. Is that 50? No, you're left with 65. That's true. That means you made 30% on your investment. So leverage, if you make money, it enhances your return. If you lose money, it can kill you. If you bought a stock and it went down half in value, if it's your own money, you still have your $50 of your $100. But if you bought a stock on margin, that's you put in 50 and borrowed another 50, stock lost 40% of its value, you're left with only $5 at the end of the thing. So you lost basically 90% of your money. So leverage is just like any powerful weapon. If you know how to use it, If you use it, think of it as a very sharp katana. If you know how to use it, it cuts your opponent. If you don't, you're going to cut yourself. Generally, you use financial ratios for a lot of different reasons, but primarily to make comparisons of firms with other firms and to compare the firm with itself over time. We're going to start with what we call common size financial statements. We have two of them, common size balance sheet, where each item in the balance sheet you're Moses, right? Oh, Alan, okay. Each item in the balance sheet is divided by total assets. The reason we divided by total assets is kind of uh, the size of the balance sheet. And we always know that total assets are going to be non-zero. So we have no reason to divide by zero. Common size income statement, divide each item by total revenues. Very rarely you have firms with zero revenues, but especially if it's a startup. But in most cases, you're going to have positive revenues. You know, if a firm has zero revenues, the entire point of financial analysis of the financial statements is meaningless to begin with. So even if you see that, you don't lose anything. So in common size balance sheet, everything in percentages of total assets, and in common size income statements, everything is in terms of revenues. To kind of see what things look like, there are two reasons we do this. One, if I'm making comparisons across firms, are of different size. For example, there are two plays I like in the AI type area. One of them is, of course, NVIDIA. NVIDIA has a market cap of almost, it used to be 3 trillion, but it's about 2.5 now. I also like another company, Micron Systems. They make high-speed memory chips that are used in AI systems. But this company's market cap is about 100 plus billion. So if I'm going to make comparisons, I look at the revenues of NVIDIA, it's huge. But is it huge because it's a big company, or is it huge because they're selling a lot of stuff? That's why we need common size financial statements. And two, we also want to compare the firms over time. Firms do not stay the same size over time. They organically grow because they make money, they keep the money inside the company. And or B, they acquire other firms. If today Microsoft bought NVIDIA, that would never happen. I don't think that would ever pass the regulatory screening, but if it did, suddenly you would have it a $6 trillion company. Okay. So if I want to compare Microsoft before the purchase and after the purchase, I need to be talking about apples to apples comparison. One is apples, the second one is, grapefruit, something like that. That's why we need common size financial statements. Let's download financial statements for two companies. And now we're going to do this properly. If you go to sec.gov, This is the website for Securities and Exchange Commission. All listed firms have to file their financial statements quarterly to SEC, and SEC keeps a record of these. Depending upon your zoom level, page looks a little bit different, so I'm going to zoom down a little bit. What happened? Oh, okay, they changed it. Okay. Search sec.gov and Edgar. Edgar is the database of SEC. Let's get the financial statements for, let's see, Walmart. Okay. The kind of financial statements I'm going to get are 10Ks and 10Qs. 10Qs are quarterly reports that are on the quarter that is not the last quarter of the fiscal year. Okay. 10Ks are annual reports that filed in the last quarter of a fiscal year of the company. A lot of companies have fiscal years that end December 31st, but that is not necessarily universal. So, for example, Walmart has an annual report that ends on January 31st. Okay. So they file their 10Ks at the end of January of each year. I'm going to look at the 10K. Oh, go back. And let's hit the filing. Because if you hit on the link, it's just going to give you a text filing. That's not what I want.